Right, next speaker. I'm hoping I'm going to pronounce Chen Ben Natter, who is Director of Worldwide S&P Account Management at Taboola. Chen has built and scaled teams in hyper-growth startups such as Tatango, AppsFlyer, and Taboola now. So he leads a globally distributed team of 30 CSMs who service over 6,000 SMB businesses and generate 300 million a year. So Chen is going to share with us his thoughts on building a sustainable engagement model, developing a rapid hiring and onboarding process, and also touch on the playbooks that the CSMs use. So without further ado, Chen, you have the podium.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yep. Can you hear me? No. Okay, I guess. Oh, here I go. Thank you so much. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Chen. I work for a company called Taboola, and today I'm going to share with you 4 steps that I think you should all consider when you're setting up and scaling up a SMB business. Show of hands, who is currently part of a CSM SMB practice? All right, that's cool. Anybody, let's say more of the leadership side, that is thinking now about starting or is currently leading a CSM SMB practice? All right, fantastic. So this is a very brief presentation. By all means, feel free to reach out to me for more detail and how you can apply this in your business. So really the 4 things that I'm going to talk about today is the importance of having a very clear mission and mandate, setting up customer journey. So to take a page from Aaron's book, if you have not maybe 5 minutes, but more like 5 hours, I think customer journey is the first thing you want to nail down. And then using prescriptive playbooks to drive that journey and other parts of setting up and scaling up your organization. And finally, rapid hiring and onboarding procedures. Show of hands, anybody has heard of Taboola before? All right, great. So most of you haven't heard of us, but you've definitely seen us before. You probably are reading either The Guardian or The Telegraph or Bloomberg or any of these sites. And the technology that we provide essentially provides a content recommendation platform that shows you things that you might be interested in when you're just done reading about customer success or coronavirus and other things. And turns out this is actually a pretty big business opportunity. So right now the company is generating well over $1 billion. We're giving over $500 billion of these recommendations monthly. We're reaching more than half of the world's connected population, which in many major companies, the US is actually deeper reach than Facebook. Rebe is not here, so I can take a piss. And we, alongside these very kind of notable properties, we actually have a myriad of many other publishers that run like your favorite blog about, again, customer success or gardening or what have you. And I'm part of the business that actually helps the other party, the advertisers that get to share their stories through that recommendation platform. So you might get a recommendation about other story in The Telegraph or The Guardian, or you might get a recommendation about, from the Customer Success Network telling you about this great conference. And right now we have 10,000 of these, and as Peter mentioned, most of those are SMB. So why should you pay attention? So this team, using these 4 keys that I've described, I've been able to scale up along with this beautiful team, what I consider to be a very successful practice. So what I think is really interesting is in the kind of post-cloud age, companies typically start with SMB and then graduate or move up market, but Taboola took the different path. So Taboola has been around for about 10, 12 years, and SMB only came on about 4 years ago. We're currently managing in the SMB practice, we're managing 36% of the company's revenue and over 70% of its advertisers. The team, as was mentioned before, was tripled over the past 10 months and is a very reliable partner where we can kind of park a lot of the SMB advertisers and give them reliable service and deliver outcomes, while our enterprise business really goes out and focus on those type of engagements. And it's a very rapid business, so we onboard 350 customers per month, just to kind of give a sense. So SMBs, so just to make sure we're all talking about the same thing, let's start with the customer. OECD definition, but I think the size of the company is a very, very good proxy for us to kind of talk about, decide what segment of business we're talking about. It is not the only way to carve it out, obviously. I like it. Can have more conversations about that later. But I think the really important thing to caveat here is that this is the majority of businesses in the world, right? So if you're saying, I'm not doing SMB, you're basically really ignoring the crushing majority of the businesses in the world. And a few more, oh, great. So there are V's here and X's here. If your business is currently selling primarily to government agencies or manufacturing, if your product is very targeted towards airlines or jet engines, SMB is not the right area for you because there aren't SMBs. It's kind of economies of scale type businesses. But if you're selling into anybody that provides a digital product or service, mobile app developers, for instance, or people that sell and provide offline services, accountants, consultants, law firms, then it may very well be an SMB. Same is true about retail. Obviously, with retail, it gets a bit more muddy. There are huge retailers, and then you have 10 people shops. Specifically online first or online only ones are a lot of them are SMBs and so on. Okay, so how do these businesses operate? 4 things that I think are key. 1, there's a very simple stakeholder map, right? So if I'm going to sell to Adobe tomorrow, I'm going to need to really understand all the different users that are possibly aligned with my value proposition. There's going to be a procurement process. There's going to be legal. There's going to be sometimes, I guess, executive sponsors that sign off the budget independent of the business owner. With SMBs, you don't have any of that. You typically have 1 or 2 people, someone that signs off the budget and somebody that uses the platform. And that actually also kind of really translates to the sense of agency as in ownership and the sense of urgency. So if we're a 10-people team or a 50-people team or a 100-people team even, typically what happens is these people feel a greater sense of ownership to what's going on rather than say, oh, I'm going to park it with that person and it's on them, it's their decision, it's not with me, which is an amazing leverage for us as customer success practitioners. And they're also going to move with urgency because they're in the kind of venture capital side of backed type businesses, we're running out of runway. We need to do something about this now, whereas corporates typically might have kind of a more laid back approach at times. They're resource constrained. I think that one is pretty straightforward, and I very deliberately put a very, I think, compelling quote from Tony Robbins, being success is more contingent on being resourceful than having resources. So I think that's not the be-all end-all of things. And finally, I think very, very interestingly, and really the thing that really makes me excited about working with SMBs, they're coachable. They are, at times, or I'd say most of the time, they are really, really, really good at what they do, but they don't know your business or your platform, and they are willing to change their practices to align with what your product does, whereas sometimes enterprises would come and say, I need you to change your product to meet my workflow or process. So again, this is something I think that's key to keep in mind as you build your customer success practice. Okay, 1 word of caution. Do not, or I would recommend you do not go to market with an SMB CSM practice before your product is ready. So much like I said, if you're selling primarily into financial, traditional financial institutions or government, that's just not gonna gel. If your product doesn't have, let's call it the administrative piece, so you can't add users, you can't have billing globally, there's no point in setting the services practice, right? Don't build the house from the ceiling. There's some table stakes that have to be put in place for you to apply some of these recommendations. Okay. I'm going to skip that just for time. So mission and mandate. So what do I mean by mission and mandate? First, you have to be very prescriptive and clear about who is it that you service. Because if you don't, what ends up happening is SMB will typically become this kind of stopgap or catch-all, everything that doesn't meet MQL, SQL, whatever we want to refer to it. And I think it really does relate to Aaron's point earlier about customer success qualifying and deciding who's a good fit customer, who's a bad fit customer. So to kind of take on that point, I want to be able to say this is a good fit customer for the SMB service model, and this is not. So you want to be very, very clear who you can service and who you cannot. And in the corollary in the Taboola story is we typically service companies that have less than 200 people. Again, if the stakeholder map inflates, I can't manage it. We have to have people that, advertisers that care about post-click behavior. That's something that's specific to our business, but that's what the business outcome that they desire that I can deliver. If they're wanting something else, like branding activity, great, we have an enterprise team for that. And they have to have an in-house resource to actually hands-on manage advertising campaigns, right? We won't do any managed service for them. Any questions about that, or does that make sense? All right. Engagement. You wanna be, again, clear about what you do and what you don't do. So in the spirit of the times, SMB typically tends to be an inside sales, so you kind of do calls rather than go fly out and do on-site meetings and QBRs. You kind of talk about the expected response time. My team is very deliberate about we don't do social channels. We respond within one business day rather than, sometimes you have an expectation of much, much shorter response times. And lastly, top-line KPI. So what are you measured on? And again, I'm going to tie back to both Aaron and Peter's talk about revenue and being closer to the money than the door. So the SMB team in Taboola is a kind of each of them is a one-man army. There's no one person owning the commercial engagement and one person owning the solution side and a third person owning something else. We are end-to-end, we own the relationship end-to-end, and therefore we are accountable for the revenue, expansion, retention, and otherwise. Activation, which is, I'm gonna kind of focus on that for the rest of this presentation. So again, there's no onboarding team, an ongoing team, and an implementation person, and a non-implementation person. Activation is something that we are very maniacally focused on, again, to Aaron's point. If you can't get that right, there's no point in focusing on anything else. I'll say that it's important to have that balance if you have an SMB team that is end-to-end, because if you create commissions or bonuses that are targeting a person on revenue in CSM world or post-sales world, you're basically telling them to go after and engage only their biggest customer, because it's much easier to take additional $1,000 for somebody that's spending $100,000 less than to get an engagement off the ground. So you have to have KPIs that kind of balance each other. And coverage, I'll just say in a word that it's completely aligned with what Aaron said before about you need to kind of engage with many advertisers to see where the opportunity is. So again, it's about trying to avoid or prevent that tunnel vision. Customer journey. So what's a customer journey? A customer journey is about describing all the interventions you want a services person to have. Sorry, I don't have any notion of time. How am I doing on time?
5 to 7.
5 more minutes. Got it. No problem. So all the interventions you want a services person to do to complement the product to get the customer from intention. I want to try this out, 2 business outcomes, and then, so I guess initial success, and then from initial success to repeating and expanding that success. And you want to identify what's nuanced and what's nuanced and requires a human agent and what can actually be productized. So I'm just going to put, this is one piece, the activation piece, the onboarding piece, if you will, from the SMB team's playbook or customer journey. 3 touch points within 3 days. This is what I want. This is what I need a human agent to do to get a customer to see initial success. And the really beautiful thing about customer journey, if you get it right, you kind of have this flywheel of other things that you get for free, right? Because if you say how many touch points you want and what do you want them to look like, you instantly know what's going to be your capacity model. And then there's no conversation with sales operations or HR or whoever determines your headcount about how many people do I need. It's simply a function of how many customers I have, churn, and forecasted sales. If the threshold is here, I should have more headcount. It also obviously tells you what are the required competencies you want from a CSM, right? Because you need somebody that can drive this engagement. And therefore, it tells you who you should hire. It also helps you understand what you can automate. Now, stop there. So this is that capacity model that I talked about. So how do I think about a account manager capacity or a customer success manager capacity? I need a one-time investment of 3.5 hours to get an account off the ground, to do these 3 touch points. And then for those accounts that make it past that cliff, I need an ongoing 3 hours per month, 45 minutes per month to talk about expansion opportunities and the rest to do other things. Prescriptive playbooks. So what I've seen many times is that we want to drive these, we want to drive CSMs to do these things, and what we end up doing is creating Google Sheets and sending email alerts, and really separating the guidelines and the data points they need to do from the trigger. And what you really want to do is kind of bring it all together. Sorry, for time, I'm gonna rush through the abstract and kind of focus on the concrete. So if I want people to have kickoff calls, this is a screenshot from we use Asana, general purpose a task management platform. You can obviously implement this with anything similar. Every time an account is created in the SMB Taboola book, those 350 that I told you about before, an account manager gets a task. You need to kick it off. What does kickoff mean? It means you need to have a call that ends with a mutual agreement on a success plan. What does a success plan look like? Here's a template. Create your instance of that template and share it with the customer. During this kickoff call, you should try and kind of have somewhere between 35 and 45 minutes conversation, and 10 minutes should be about getting to know your customer. What does that mean? It's about asking these 5-6 questions. So you want to be very prescriptive. And you have to do this in kind of a trackable, reportable way that ideally kind of fosters collaboration. So this is literally this morning or yesterday, our pipeline for onboarding globally. It's a Kanban board where you move from I got it to, and I didn't talk to them, to the thing is complete. Lastly, and I really can talk about this topic for days, one of my all-time favorite topics. How do I get to hire the right people and nurture them? So I think the beautiful thing about SMBs is that you have to take, and this is what was my biggest area of growth for 2019. I was used to, as an enterprise person, being very selective about the people that I take on. And if you can't hire at scale. You can't triple a team in 10 months, right? And then I was pushed to taking lots of these diamonds in the rough or wild cards and making sure I make the right call or bets with these people and nurture them to become successful professionals. So you gotta make sure you have, again, that competency model, which is derived from that customer journey, right? If I need somebody to have a good kickoff call, then I need them to have, in our specific case, domain knowledge would be digital marketing knowledge, or I need them to be communicating, to communicate very clearly. Ideally, you don't want this to go over 3 or 4 traits if you're hiring young and less experienced people. And you want to set them up for success and you want to have kind of role play exercise, so you get a sense of what this person brings against the specific need you have, right? So if you want them to drive a kickoff call, have part of your both your hiring and onboarding process include a role play for a kickoff call, and then there's a mutual decision about whether this is a good fit, and obviously you get a very much more informed decision. I think I'm out of time, so I'll park that. I'll just say that I think a good hiring and onboarding, or a good onboarding program, should refer to product knowledge, service practices, and basically everything else, satellite systems and internal procedures. And I'll summarize by saying, please, if you're setting up or recommending to you, when you set up if you want to blitzscale or upscale a customer success organization, have a clear mission and mandate, set expectations with your customers, your team, and your cross-functional partners. Spend time on nailing down your customer journey. You don't have to get it right the first time, but you have to have it. You have to start with something. You want to have prescriptive playbooks, and you want to have hiring and onboarding procedures that allow you to move fast.
Thank you, Ken. So one of my big takeaways from your presentation was process.
Yeah, I'm an engineer, sorry.
Okay, don't apologize, it's okay. So one of my questions is, so how often do you review those processes?
That's a great question. I can't say that at this point in time we have kind of a cadence, but what we do is we respond to issues. So for instance, you saw the email for, this is an actual candidate email, if any of you are ever going to apply to Taboola, you're going to see that, for Pasta Evangelist. So Pasta Evangelist is a very, very small brand. And initially we did it with Nike. And then after we tried Nike as I guess a subject for a simulation, we're like, well, this is an SMB role. You're never ever going to engage with Nike. Why are we putting candidates against this? So it is very, let's call it ad hoc, rather than recurring. Does that make sense? Yeah.
It evolves.
Yes, it evolves based on actual feedback and what we see is breaking, essentially.
So I'm just going to go through just some very quick questions,
yeah.
And then I guess we're all going to have a much needed sort of coffee. So how do you handle a customer that is signed up, but you know the outcomes are not achievable after the first contact?
So basically at Taboola we have 3 levels of service. We have enterprise, we have SMB, and we have self-service. So at the end of a kickoff call, one of 2 things will happen. Either the customer will commit to adhere to our best practice, or we would respectfully guide them to the more flexible solution, which is our self-service. So if you want to do your own thing, great. If you have any questions, ping customer success at Taboola, which is basically a reactive support service.
I think the next question is kind of linked somewhat. This is from people who are resonating with the over-promising from sales and pre-sales. Mm-hmm. I guess with emphasis on the SMB marketplace, that there's an over-promise, and how do you manage that expectation from the customer? Because the salesperson may have said, look, we can provide you with all this, yet it's a very low ARR.
Yeah.
So how do you?
So I'll say 2 things. First, that volume that I mentioned, which I think is significant, 350 customers per month, is actually not driven primarily by sales. We have a self-service sign-up, okay, right? So the majority of them, we would be the first responder. So we get to set the expectations and make that qualification decision. And that goes back to my cautionary ask to, if you want to set up a velocity business that's sustainable for your wider business, you need to make sure you have that type of self-service side. Now, that said, there are obviously instances, so just to kind of be very concrete, I said we don't do branding activity with Taboola at SMB because it tends to be a kind of branding activities tend to be a very kind of long payback period type of activities, unlike performance marketing. And in these cases, we would very respectfully and firmly decline.
Okay.
So I think the important thing is if you set the expectations and you have the mandate and you own the revenue, you kind of have the rapport or the political capital, for lack of a better word, to be able to push back on sales.
One last question, and this is something that's very dear to my painful experience, how SMBs might manage their own change inside their own businesses. So how the whole area of best practices for change management, people find these organizations the most difficult to project manage and align strategically. They're often chaotic, good Lord.
Right, so the question is, what do you do when you engage with a customer that won't adhere to the best practice, or would you articulate?
I guess, yeah, they're not responding, you know, they're not able to get their own processes correct.
So I must say I'm not 100% sure I understand the question, but again, I think the important thing, and I had that on one of the slides, is to understand, on the challenge slide that I tried to rush through. The thing to really understand for me about SMB is that it is an opportunity cost-driven engagement. So if I have a single account manager or a customer success manager on 50 engagements, and in this specific engagement, there isn't, let's say, a good connection, that we don't feel like there's going to be positive ROI on the time the success manager invests in this relationship, I very deliberately ask the customer success manager to guide them on a different direction and go basically look elsewhere. Does that, do you feel like that relates?
Super. All right, thanks very much.
Fantastic, thank you.